I guess without further ado, I'd like to introduce Benny Skelton, who's the President and CEO of Cyclone Energy Group, who is our moderator for tonight. Take it away, Ben.
Thanks, Dave. Excited to be here. I'm excited to see the panel here. So for those of you who know me, as Dave said, I'm President of Cyclone Energy Group. We do energy efficiency and building performance consulting here, mostly in Chicago with a lot of buildings. So excited to hear what our panel has to say today about IAQ. So I won't take any more time away from our talented group. I'm going to just have them introduce themselves here. And as you do, would you answer this question? What was your biggest priority before the pandemic? And I'll start with you, Shona.
Thanks, Benny. So hi, everybody. My name is Shona O.D. I work for DLR Group, and at DLR Group, I'm our high performance design leader. I'm also the incoming chair for YAY at the society level. So I'm sure all the ASHRAE folks on the call, if you're a young engineer in ASHRAE and I haven't met you yet, you'll be hearing from me soon. So my biggest priority before the pandemic, I'm going to assume that's a work priority. It's actually the same as it is now. So before the pandemic, I was working on creating a dashboard for a large tech client that would help them make empowered decisions around healthy spaces. So a lot of my job really focuses on leveraging sensor technology to make data-informed decisions and specialize in indoor air quality in particular. So I've been working in that realm for around 5 years and tinkering with sensors and building curated data visualization tools to help clients make those decisions. So it hasn't really changed. The only big change has been that I do it from my home instead of being on a plane a lot. So that's the biggest change.
Great. Probably nice not being on a plane right now.
Yeah, my dog really likes it, that's for sure.
Thru, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I am, a lot of my team is part of the Big Shy and ASHRAE chapter, so I am excited to be here and present and be with the rest of the team. We have a great panel lined up. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cohesion. A little bit of history on those that don't know who or what Cohesion is. We are a building experience platform that is driving the change to intelligent buildings. We're doing that by bringing together tenant experience, building operations, and pushing insights through our digital twin platform. And a little bit more of history is that we actually spun out of ESD Global, which is an MEP firm here in Chicago. And they incubated us for about 2.5 to 3 years prior to our spin out in August of 18. And we were, they are partners, investors, and just overall great people over at ESD. And we've had a great time, being part of the family of ESD. And we've recently raised our first round of external funding outside of the ESD family, and got some, got quickly through the pandemic, I guess. We scaled in Singapore and Asia, which was not our biggest priority prior to the pandemic, was going live in Asia. But I would say that, since the pandemic has happened, we pushed up our roadmap to really driving a focus on indoor air quality. And so that's something that we launched at the beginning, I guess mid-August was our feature in our platform of indoor air quality, which included measuring, monitoring, and providing insights to building owners and operators on, how everything ties together, both from the airflow data to the different pollutant levels. So we can dive into that more, but excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Very cool, welcome. And Drew, would you like to go last here?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. Drew DePriest. I work at CBRE on one of our digital platforms called Host. Have spent the last 16 years or so kicking around everything from building automation and controls to workplace technology to real estate technology on the corporate side, and now at CB trying to bridge that gap between sort of the front of house user experience and the back of house, more building system type arena. It have been involved with ASHRAE and Big Shy for a number of years, was a quote unquote young engineer of ASHRAE in 2013, which I guess now classifies me as an old engineer of ASHRAE. I've done some work with the Winter Conference when it's been in town. Big fan of IAQ in general. A couple research reports and studies that came out in 2015, 5 years ago, kind of woke me up. Went out and got my whale AP after it, and have just been enamored with all the progress in the space ever since. I think priority pre-COVID, Benny, to your question, is similar to Shona. It hasn't really changed much. The focus has shifted, but by and large, just helping our big Fortune 100 clients connect the dots on all their various business systems and building systems and get them all integrated into one place. Now the primary focus, though, is just getting people back to work safely. So priorities have shifted, but focus is still largely the same.
All right, thank you, Drew. Just to add to the group that has joined us here, if you would like to ask a question of the attendees, use the Q&A portion of the Zoom, and I will incorporate those questions into our discussion here. So feel free to ask as many questions as you'd like here. We'll try to, we got plenty of time. So, you know, Drew, I think I want to kind of go off of what you're just saying there at the end. You've been helping your clients, you know, kind of the same way that you were before. So what are they asking you for now that they kind of know this is here? Are they asking about safe back to work, or are they into that mode yet?
I think we've gone through a few different waves. In my experience, I think right now, largely every large corporate is focused on really restoring confidence and trust. It's been 6 months now that everybody's been home. I think the general psychology is set in of, you know, we're afraid to leave the house without taking precautions we've never taken before, let alone get on public transit or, you know, go into an office space that it's inside. We were talking in our prep call that a lot of us don't feel comfortable sitting down in restaurants right now because it's enclosed. So there's a level of, you know, how do you rebuild trust with people so they can come back to a place where they can be more productive? Those of us with kids at home, this has been a struggle. I've been fighting with bandwidth. Both of my kids are doing remote learning right now, and it's not pleasant. We're making the best we can. So the kinds of things that we work with our clients right now is, you know, from an IAQ perspective, just trying to measure what we can, both how many people are in a space. A lot of clients are trying to keep capacities at maybe 50% of a floor's head count that we may have had in the past, and then making that information just more publicly available. So, you know, the more you can share with your employees around what you're doing to make the space safer, if that's air changes, if it's UV, whatever that happens to be, then you can start welcoming them back. A lot of our clients now keep pushing deadlines back. So, I mean, I had clients this week tell me they're not going back until June of next year. I've had some say January. So I think we're still kind of in a wait and see mode. But yeah, it's rebuilding trust and confidence more than anything.
Yes, Shona, curious, you've been doing dashboards for clients, trying to make data-driven decisions on stuff with air quality for 5 years, you said. So, you know, how are you seeing the go back to work or back to school, a lot of the work that you do?
Yeah, you know, when we started testing for air quality, it was part of master planning for schools. And so that was really part of evaluating which buildings needed to be improved and which buildings were kind of warm, safe, and dry. And so we're kind of seeing the same trend happening now with workplace clients, higher ed clients, and schools, where there's kind of the baseline level where people want to quantify what we can, as Drew mentioned, but also look at what mechanical systems that they have. So, you know, up until quite recently, mechanical systems are things that are ugly that you hide behind a wall. And now people want to understand what's behind that wall and how that can offer them flexibility when it comes to responding to different occupancy levels, and then also responding to additional ventilation needs. So that's kind of the baseline level, is evaluating what they have today and evaluating the risk of that. there's kind of the next step for us is really looking at certifications, really to Drew's point of building trust. So we have a lot of clients who are pursuing RESET certification, which is a performance-based indoor air quality certification. You know, we do a couple of those a quarter before COVID, and then when the pandemic hit, we were inundated with RESET certification requests. And then there's the group of people who keep on mentioning that, you know, they're not going to bring people back to work unless it's better at work than it is at home. And so one thing that really struck me, a client mentioned, was, you know, when COVID goes away, or if there's a vaccine, we're still going to have one hell of a marketing campaign to bring people back to the office, because some of us want to stay at home, or maybe there's creature comforts that we'll be used to after being at home for a year. And so really, we've been starting to track home indoor air quality in addition to office indoor air quality, so that we can help bridge that gap when it does happen, that if we assume that that COVID is no longer a risk, that we can use indoor air quality data to help people return to work and show them how the controlled environment in, say, an office or a school could be healthier than their homes.
Thru, I'm curious, building on that, has anything in the building of your platform changed because of this pandemic? Have you seen different needs that you're shifting your focus or your priorities?
You know, from our end, I would say how we, you know, it's, as Shona mentioned, we are looking at the certification level. Building the trust with the occupants of the building is important. So when we first started kind of speccing out the feature, it was around driving towards the optimized indoor air quality, around, you know, people feeling tired and, you know, really pushing productivity to the tenant side versus people feeling safe, right, to return. So that it was less so about the shift on the actual feature itself, but the messaging is different now, right, in terms of why we need this. And it is, I think Drew mentioned before also that, you know, we're trying to get people back to buildings to feel safe. And there is a real level, I think, you know, I think that people are very scared of breathing in air in office buildings. And there's a bit of a positive campaign that we have to push, right, to the community, that it's not as bad to I guess what Shona was saying. I'd be curious to see what you're seeing, right, with the comparison to residential and homes versus the office buildings. And we have seen a lot of, you know, shifts that buildings are making to make people feel safer. Granted, we're kind of throwing out the efficiency side of the equation right now in terms of what people are doing to feel safe, but there's going to be a lot of change that comes out of it. And I think people feeling comfortable and safe is going to be the #1 priority for buildings as they come back. And, you know, the building is one step of it, but there's also a lot of, you know, actions that come to coming to a building, like the safety of transportation and how they get to the building itself. So we can't solve everything through technology, but there's a lot that we can do.
Just one point on the energy efficiency piece, and maybe we'll talk about that later too, Benny, is that one thing that we're seeing is that if we have historical data for buildings, for instance, our Chicago office, our company has 30 offices, so there was a mandate to work with all of the facilities at your local building to increase the outdoor air. And so then if that's the case and we're arbitrarily just increasing outdoor air, yes, there's an efficiency concern or an energy concern. But when we looked at our historical data, we could see that even at full occupancy, a number of our spaces already were at a peak of 600 parts per million of CO2 in the open plan office. So we were able to choose which spaces actually needed more outdoor air based on the historical data. So if we have that, we can use it to take a more sensible approach to where we need more outdoor air and where we don't, just based on that data.
Right.
No, I think that's.
Go ahead, Betty.
No, I think that's very interesting. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that's part of, you know, the value that we're adding is we are looking at indoor air quality by space and zone to see what is spiking and when things are spiking, how I think one of the more interesting, and again, this is not scientifically proven yet in terms of the statistical models, and we're building that behind the scenes right now, but we're seeing that in our buildings that have invested in the HVAC and some of the, the more sophisticated IAQ technology, they aren't seeing, spikes on certain things like particulate matter. They aren't seeing it on carbon dioxide. Clearly, there's not very many people there, but we're seeing it on TVOCs in terms of cleaning, right, and sanitation, and the increased levels of cleaning. But we are seeing it when the fans go off at night. Those TVOC levels are staying, for sustained longer periods of time, like 30 to 45 minutes in the evenings, because there isn't that airflow. But during the day, they are, the fans are turning on, and those spikes are lasting on the TVOCs roughly 4 to 7 minutes on average when we see those TVOC spikes. And I think it's interesting to see whether or not, even if we reacted right to bringing in more outside air, if there's anything we do better right in those buildings at that point in time versus not. And that's the type of stuff that we have to learn. And oftentimes a lot of the sensors, I think what's unique about our program is we are bringing in the BAS level data, and it's more off the shelf programs. I think when you do these custom programs that Shona's doing for her clients, I think you can do a lot more and you have a lot more insights than a lot of the off the shelf stuff.
No, so I think, well, I'll put my ASHRAE hat on. I already got my ASHRAE shirt on, but so a question here, building on that, Thru, is, and for Drew, I guess maybe throw this your way to start, is what are some of the, if you're seeing these TVOCs overnight that are lingering longer, ASHRAE's epidemic task force is saying, let's put more air changes in at startup, and what measures are common in the buildings that you're seeing, that you work with in the COVID prevention measure?
Sure, I'll put my ASHRAE scarf on if I can answer that. If you can see it, it's a little not quite cold enough for it yet. The things that we're looking at is really trying to narrow the focus of a lot of the things that Thru and Shona are talking about. So, increases in cleaning, especially if you have a report of someone has a positive diagnosis. Instead of cleaning the entire floor, which certainly is going to increase PVOC content as well as all kinds of other bad things, of starting to get more granular with that. We have a number of sensor partners who have put together things and pivoted very quickly, where we can now orchestrate a dynamic cleaning exercise. So being able to track who has sat at which workstations over the last 48 hours, what conference rooms have been visited, just kind of be able to trace where people have gone and leverage that information to then hand it over to a cleaning crew so they can only focus on those areas where people actually were. So in terms of minimizing PVOCs and other harmful molecules in the air, it's really just how do we get better and more focused about doing that. It helps the occupants as well, because then they can see on a heat map, for instance, 10 people sat here this week, but no one sat on the east side of the building. If I'm looking at a floor plan, I'm going where people are not right now, just in general. So the cost factor of that, numbers that I've seen, it gets up to $10, $11 a square foot to do a deep clean right now. So even beyond the air quality, it's the financial aspect of how do we help drive and focus those efforts a lot more intelligently is probably the best way to do it. The sensors were also, from an IoT perspective, of kind of tracking in real time how many people are on the floor. We have a lot of clients who, if they have occupancy of 100 employees, maybe now they only want to bring back 50 because they have to maintain distancing and they're only turning on, certain rooms or certain desks. So we've seen a surge in sensor providers who can provide that information and then generate kind of a real-time alert of, hey, you're hitting your capacity. Maybe we should dial back a bit. Just another aspect of kind of driving safety. So we're seeing a little bit more of reactive and a little bit of proactive side as well.
I guess I'd take the same question to you, Shona. How are you seeing technology applied for COVID prevention?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to answer the question about sensor technology and kind of table the mechanical design piece, as I know there's there's the ASHRAE position document and that, and lots of other great resources. Very similar to Drew, really, there's a lot of data convergence happening. So, taking the metadata of the building, so all of the design parameters, and then overlaying that on BAS information and sensor technology that we're putting into the space. So the most popular sensor technology that we're leveraging is air quality monitors, acoustic monitors, and then occupancy and footfall sensors. So really what our clients are looking for is, number one, they want to know who's on each floor. And so from a privacy perspective, a lot of occupancy tracking software requires you to tag occupants on their phone or on their key card, and that's not something that a lot of our clients want. They want to respect the privacy of their staff, or if it's a unionized workforce, that's not something that is typically allowed. So instead, we're leveraging things like verge sense or density to understand at the floor level and zone level where people are sitting and where they're moving. And then we're actually, right before COVID, we were doing a research project where we were combining air quality and acoustic data in order to determine if that could predict the number of people in a space to the same accuracy as occupancy sensors. And we're actually seeing with our algorithm that has a correlation and can predict it to the same accuracy as, say, something like Enlighted. So really just different ways of understanding how people are using space, how they're traveling through it, and then also dwell time. So understanding if a certain person stays in a certain place for a period of time, when we need to go in and clean. And I guess the last piece is we're seeing a lot of people wanting to go to free address. So where you might have had a assigned seat before, it's not the way that people are planning to return to work. And instead there's more of a free address approach. And with that comes planning challenges around just fiscal planning and square footage planning for the future. So being able to leverage that occupancy data to inform future real estate decisions is something that we've been asked for a lot.
Through, how's that looking on your end as far as future real estate? Are you getting, I've seen announcements with the Riverside building and some other things. Like how are you seeing this roll out into some of the new buildings with the sensor technology and the informed decision making?
Yeah, I think on top of indoor air quality, we're seeing a lot on the touchless side, touchless controls. And from it's again, lack of touch on anything that we can prevent. So access control, digital key cards, touchless elevators. So we are doing integrations for elevator call buttons in the mobile app, so they don't have to touch, tenants don't have to touch the elevator buttons, because even if a building has destination dispatch, you can go up, but you have to press something to come down. So we're working with major elevator companies to put in that functionality. We are also, I think one of the big things that outside of controls in general, right, we need to communicate more to the tenants. I think we just need to, and do it in a way that's not inundative to their their kind of day. I think that they want to know what our building's doing, how are they measuring, if there's any kind of health issues in the building. I just think that there's a lot that we could do to make people feel comfortable to come back. I also think that the other part is, again, occupancy was mentioned. There's a lot that from a sensor technology we could do, but there's also a lot of information that building-based systems have that are latent data that aren't really leveraged, and that's something that we provide our customers as well. So right now, just based off of the access control, we can provide who's coming in, what tenant companies are coming in, and we help the building here in Chicago turn off, and this is manual because it's right now none of this is really demand responsive, but it was more so that we helped that building save money from being able to understand which tenants weren't coming in, because we're seeing a lot of buildings push out tenant surveys that not everyone's actually responding to. So a lot of this information is manual, and we're automating that information for our buildings. It's kind of what we're seeing.
I think that brings up kind of a touchy question of transparency with technology, and what's the right amount of transparency versus the level of knowledge of perhaps the person looking at the the information. Drew, do you want to maybe give some insight on how users are taking the technology that you're implementing in the buildings and looking at it and using it?
Sure.
Responding?
I think folks have certainly moved their comfort level a bit more than they've grown accustomed to over the last 10 years. I mean, Shona's touched on data privacy and some of the censoring platforms she alluded to, like a Verge Sense or a Point Grab. I mean, those are cameras that you install on the ceiling of a building. And 6 months ago, 12 months ago, no one really would have thought to, possibly have those. We have some clients now talking about contact tracing of, honest to God, putting an app on a phone or having people carry around a physical Bluetooth chip to trace where they're going in the workspace. And 12 months ago, that conversation doesn't even happen. I've got 2 clients right now wanting to know how soon they can have it. It's just the level of transparency has changed, or the expectation of transparency has changed. And I think there is still a line to walk. And I know Thru and Shona both have strong thoughts on this as well, of even though we have the ability to measure certain aspects of the air, of light, of sound right now, how much is too much? You want to be forthcoming, especially now that everyone has Google and everyone is an expert on epidemiology and ventilation, and whatever I saw on Twitter from my 3 favorite scientists are all telling me I need 6 air changes per hour. The non-engineer, our general user base, they're not going to, more often than not, know what they're looking at. So the trick is, how do you package up all of this information, give it to the right people who are operating the building, and then also, communicate that out, to Thru's point, effectively, so you're instilling enough confidence in the people who are coming to inhabit that space, but not overburden them or not give them, a reason to have concern. So it is still very much a fine line, I think, but again, the last 6 months, in my eyes, the conversation of how much to share with people has expanded quite a bit. So it's continuing to evolve.
Curious, Thru, what's your opinion? Because you've got a app that was built for tenants, built for people in the building to look at the data. So.
Yep, I think it depends on, we ran a survey in May, right, I guess at the beginning of the pandemic, and we asked employees what information, well, one, do they want information? And obviously everyone answered yes, but what kind of information they want and how often they would want to consume that information. And we, the overwhelming, it was, I think, something in the high 60s said that they want to know that information is there if they want to go get it, but they don't want it always in their face and just kind of reminding them that they have to care as much. And so I think it's the having access to information, and it's, I'll get into what kind of information next, but it was more about knowing and feeling comfortable that the data was being collected at a minimum. And if they wanted to see it, they could see it. So that was kind of the basis for the question. Then it was digging into, well, what kind of information do you want to see? And we heard health information was at the top of that list, knowing, if there was COVID in the building, not knowing, people didn't actually want to know who or where because they thought that was invasive, but rather just knowing that there is somebody, in the building that has it and that the building is taking proper protocol, which, that was in May. That could change, that may have changed to now in terms of knowing where and how people got it. They wanted to know how often the building was getting cleaned and what kind of cleaning was being done. So how often, where, and then the last one was in terms of how many people are in the building. So occupancy and any other building updates that in general, the building updates, but occupancy was a big one. How many people are you letting into the building? When are they coming in? Are you pushing any other kind of protocols? And then we asked about kind of what does the building have to do at a minimum for you to feel comfortable and safe to come back? And it was around masking, right? Mandating a mask policy at the base of the buildings, which I think those are largely, more municipal level and state level mandated, but there was a lot around that communication. So I think it's, just at a base level, I think people want to know there's information. Then when you kind of come into the indoor air quality side of it, we haven't really, since tenants aren't backed, we haven't really rolled out to the full tenant platform to see their thoughts. But as we work to, we as a company, right, are using it. And so we have sensors up in our office, and it's interesting as a tech company, I see the reactions to some people who don't know what indoor air quality is. I don't have a bunch of, mechanical engineers that actually understand, what IAQ does and means. And so they see a spike in a level and they react like, oh, it's not safe to go back. So I'm watching the reactions of my own employees to see, what are their reactions to this type of information. And we have to, per the well, to get well certification, we have to have an information on, what does this actually mean for your health? And we aren't seeing that click through, right? So it is a fast consumption of data, but to Shona's point, they don't know what they're consuming. And so you have to be very blatantly obvious if, and choose, and I guess it chooses the wrong word, but display the information in a way that's not going to be scary to those that don't understand it, right? So if the overall building, from an IAQ standpoint, if the overall building is at a healthy level, say that the air quality is good, like very, very basic stuff, and communicate it clearly as to what they should care about, and then give them the breakdown of the measures if they want to see it. We use red, yellow, green, stoplight, very simple to consume information for the building tenants. But we're also, we've talked about building operators should know and be notified. Tenants can seek that information for that, for that matter. We don't actually push out alerts to if different pollutant levels rise, but rather they can come seek the information. And if it stays at a sustained level, more of that tenant manager level or the tenant, facilities management side will get alerts. So I think it's a lot of it's managing the messaging. We hear a lot from the, buildings when we're selling that they don't want people to know. And I said, well, the worst thing you could do is have a tenant go and buy an off-the-shelf sensor and tell you what they think the building is doing. So do you want to manage the message or do you not? So.
I think that's an excellent point. Pause for 1 second. If you guys have questions, use the Q&A window rather than the chat, so it's easier to keep track of. Shona, I would like your thoughts on this, and then we have a couple questions from the audience talking about reset and well, and thought you'd be perfect to answer that.
Sure, and I feel like Thru probably covered a lot of the things that I would mention too. So, reset and well certification requires you to share data. So we've been dealing with this for a long time. This conversation around transparency makes me think back to when we started sharing IAQ data with parents as part of our master planning process. And so I learned the hard way how to not communicate about IAQ data. There was a lot, if you mentioned that the CO2 levels were at 1,500 parts per million, you'd get questions of, should we evacuate the building now? Like, can our students come in? And like, we laugh, but like, if we don't communicate things in the right way, that's a perfectly understandable question, right? So to me, I've learned that before sharing information with non-building or HVAC professionals, there needs to be almost like a prerequisite amount of education that needs to happen. And so some ways that we've done that from a user perspective is that you have to click through a couple pages of content before you get to the actual raw data. And so that content may just explain what each variable is, but the main thing is what is an optimized level? So what is our well or a reset level of IAQ? What is still acceptable or industry standard? What is outside industry standard? And what is high risk? And so they are 4 very different thresholds that typically we just try and hammer home before we can even share the data. And yet we use a similar red light, green light system. The only other thing I would mention with that is, that's for the users, but a lot of the time there's decision makers, as Thru mentioned, that need to decide whether or not to share this data. And so before COVID, the main question that I got was, if we discover a problem, and we share the data, then we have to invest money in making a change. So in all of the spaces that we've measured, it is any kind of problem that we've identified has never resulted in an immediate need for capital improvements. it's actually required us to change the way that the building or the HVAC system is being operated, or else it's identified an occupant-driven issue. And obviously with the pandemic, that there's different circumstances, but just explaining to the decision makers that we're not necessarily going to ask them to make a capital investment on HVAC just because we're measuring IAQ. So it's just the first step of measuring, understanding how we're operating today, and that doesn't always result in a large ticket item.
Very good point. Can't manage what you can't measure. So if one of the questions from the audience, Shona, let's keep it with you for a moment, if you could. You mentioned well certification and reset, I believe, earlier. Can you maybe give a brief description on the contrast between those?
Sure. So both well, LEED, and reset all require indoor air quality, or all have a reference to indoor air quality monitoring. I'll start with reset just because it's kind of the central reference point for indoor air quality monitoring. But well and LEED have in the past released press releases to say that they're aligning with reset, but there is nuances between the two. So reset requires you to measure temperature, relative humidity, carbon dioxide levels, PM 2.5, and TVOCs. There's a frequency at which you need to measure. You need to select an accredited monitor. So I would recommend, even if you're not going for reset, we have a kind of a market comparison sheet of, I think it's like 30 monitors now under 55 different performance criteria, and we definitely use reset as a great resource for that. So if you're looking to select an IAQ monitor, I would start with the reset accredited monitor list. But so similarly, well requires monitoring. The biggest difference is that well requires ozone monitoring also. I go back and forth on the value of doing live ozone monitoring if you don't have a bipolar ionization system as part of your design. I don't really think it's necessary. And when you look at the market available monitors that do all the things that well asks for, you're really limited on your choices. So I go more towards the reset certification when it comes to monitoring. So both ask for live monitoring, both ask for transparency of data. I know that reset requires an accredited data provider, so someone to manage that data and feed it to the reset cloud. I'm not sure if well requires an accredited data provider per se, no. So then there we go, that's another difference.
Well, one thing that I'll add, when we were going for the recommendation of reset or well, and I don't know this as well as you, Shona, but one of the things that reset is a lot more rigorous in terms of how often they look at the data and the data pulls. And I think that those were some of the big key differences for what, from our recommendation too, is how often and how often those accredited data folks are kind of coming in and checking and how they get the data.
Yeah, and for us, we always follow the reset certification standard. Like that's just how we deploy at a minimum. And that's still not even requiring full coverage. So we have other clients wanting to do full coverage. One thing was a real benefit of following that approach on every project is that it's a consistent and third-party verified protocol. I know in the past we've been able to share a lot of our data with the Harvard COGFX study because we followed that protocol, and so it's almost like a common language that can be shared within IAQ professionals to share data sets that are gathered in a certain way. So we've been able to donate, I think it was 12 sites to them for that COGFX study. So I'm sure you can do the same with well. That's just the one that we follow. And I've already set up automated reports for the data pulls. So that piece is that kind of bottleneck, because I agree it can be challenging. That kind of bottleneck has now been eliminated. We just get daily reports, weekly reports, depending on what frequency we want.
So Drew, maybe this question goes to you. Have you had any experience or anybody in your network that's looking at the well health safety rating certification? This is a certification that came out in response to COVID from well specifically built out of the version 2 well standard that I think came out today, out of beta at least. We're curious if you've heard anything about anybody wanting to do this.
I've been following it for the last probably 5 months that it's been in existence, just the task force and seeing who's been involved with it. The short answer to the question, I haven't heard of anyone pursuing it just yet. I think it's a positive thing that it provides a structure for a lot of things that a lot of different companies are trying to piece together around a return to office plan, and just it gives you something quantifiable. Here's a checklist, here's what to do, here's what to follow. I think the fact that it includes, you know, a growing cast of experts that have been involved. Shona mentioned the Cog Effect study. I've been a huge fan of the Harvard team and Dr. Joe Allen since 2015. I know we don't plug things here, but he released this book in March of this year called Healthy Buildings, which was absolute perfect timing. He's one of the core leaders of the IWBI, the Well Task Force. So, I mean, when people like Dr. Allen and others who have been, and we've talked about this group in the past, who have been pushing IEQ and healthy buildings long before COVID got here, that to me is a massive sign of credibility. So, you know, haven't seen anyone use it, but I think it's a positive thing and very much is good for the discussion that is happening in the market right now.
Yeah, it's curious. Thru, I don't know if you've had experience with that specific program, but you mentioned certifications earlier as being something that was getting more involved with your platform. You know, Well has an annual calibration for sensors and things like that. How do you look at programs and certifications like that with that kind of maintenance involved?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge. So we're trying to figure out, at least, you know, with the sensors that we have rolled out, they send us a module that's considered recalibration. That's a new module, charges for that new module, and we insert the new module. We haven't gone through that year yet, so I'll tell you how it is in a year in the next panel of like a recap and postmortem as to how it all went. But I think that is obviously one of the challenges of IoT deployment, right? Is how do you actually manage all the devices, and then who manages the devices? And you know, we are primarily a software firm, but I think every software firm that gets an IoT says that they're not going to be a hardware firm, and somehow it creeps into your basket of goods, I guess, at some point. So I'm going to stick to we're not going to be a hardware firm, but we do help a lot with our buildings since we have, you know, folks on staff that really understand these devices. So we're helping, but as we scale, that becomes you know, that's something we have to solve for.
Great. So I want to kind of stick with the COVID here for a minute. We'll shift off of the word of the year. One of the questions from the audience, I think a couple of questions actually came in about this, is when we're not tracking COVID or SARS-CoV-2 in the air live to know if the particles are there. So what particles are you tracking? What kind of bioaerosols? What is the metric in IAQ that you look at that would correlate to the risk level of a COVID concern? And I'll leave this to anybody who wants to answer.
The big one in my eyes is air changes. It's the difference between, you know, a high performance building, take Class A downtown Chicago, for example, where you may have a dedicated outdoor air system. You may be able to crank from 20% min OA up to 100% and, you know, really push ventilation. Now that the scientific world has concluded this thing is airborne, it took a while to get there, but the fact that it's in the air, everything that I've read, and I'm a Google expert, admittedly, is the higher the ventilation rate, the greater the number of air changes per hour, you know, the better you have of flushing this thing out. Whereas, you know, you hear early anecdotes and stories of people sitting in restaurants, which historically had barely any ventilation, you know, unless they prop the door open or they have those garage doors out in the front for the windows. They've just got a packaged condenser unit on the roof with, you know, they're just trying to keep the space comfortable from a temperature perspective. So to me, it's air changes and ventilation. If you can figure those out, then that's a positive.
I would tend to agree. In my ideal sensor configuration, there's duct-mounted monitors that are tracking toxins in the air, but then you can also get the IAQ at the zone level. And so when you combine the two things together, you can start to decouple the supply air from what's in the zone. Where that can be really nice as well, as you can show that you're not recirculating air, or if you're doing 100% outside air and then just dumping, which obviously has energy concerns. But if you're doing that, you can demonstrate that. When people ask, people are constantly asking though for a COVID sensor. And that's one thing I wanted to mention with this group is I think the role of the engineer and HVAC professionals now is partly to shelter our clients from sales pitches that may not have the sufficient scientific backing to warrant an investment. I know recently a client just forwarded me an email, and somebody was basically claiming they did have a COVID sensor, and in writing was saying they had a COVID sensor. And you know, I got on the call with a call on them because I was dying to hear what this COVID sensor was, you know, and there wasn't any answers to the science behind the COVID sensor. But I just think that we really need to make sure that we're sheltering our clients from those types of pitches to make sure that they're not investing in the wrong place.
Was the sensor a thermometer and the person had a fever? Because that would probably be the most accurate device out there. Yeah, no, I think it's I guess it's interesting because throw this back to Thru with the sensors and technology. You know, what is good air quality? It's not defined, right? We know what bad air quality is, and so we've got an idea of red, yellow, green, but we really don't actually know what green is to the greatest extent. And so you know, PM 2.5 has long been kind of held as a standard as particulate size, but you know, the SARS virus lives in aerosols at 0.2, 0.3 microns, which is, you know, like a clean room level sensor, which we're not going to be putting in commercial office buildings, let alone a restaurant. So, you know, how are we kind of combating the divide that Shona and Thru have kind of talked about with what people's expectations might be?
Well, I was just I looked at a question on the chat that said, how do you correlate it to IAQ? And you don't. I mean, the real answer is you don't, right? And I think if we're actually trying to answer that question, I think that's just the wrong, one, it's too small, right? It's to be able to track it. So you can't really, to Shona's point, if somebody's selling you that they can do it, you run. But I don't know. I think that's more of a, these are going to happen, right? Pandemics are going to happen, and we're going to just see changes. I don't think that you can solve, I don't think every single time this happens, you're going to find a technology that's going to solve for it, because there could be a different, and I don't know enough about sensor technology to know what exactly, what sensor each thing can measure, but I don't think that the answer is going to be tracking it through technology. I think Thru had mentioned before contact tracing, whose responsibility it is to trace and to do contact tracing. We had a customer ask us if we did that, and I turned it back around and I said, we can, but what do you want from it? What's your end goal in doing so? And they said, I don't know, I just feel like I have to ask you what we do on it. And I said, well, are you going to track people through the tenant space? So we sell to mostly core and shell. We're getting into the enterprise space, but we track to the core and shell. And what do you want to get into the tenant space? Do you not want to? So and the building didn't have an answer to that, right? They didn't know how to answer that question. They said, you're right. We can't do anything past the tenant doors, or we don't want to take the liability to do so. And so I think the question really is, what do you want with that data, and how will you use it? It kind of comes back to, what do you do with it? And are we just scaring people more by saying that we track it? And I didn't really answer the question, but.
No, I think that's a great response. And I think it kind of leads into a good discussion here and some of the questions we're getting as well on secondary air cleaning devices. So you have data now, you're seeing that it was mentioned, I think, earlier by you that the air you're seeing is actually pretty good in good Class A commercial buildings with good ventilation systems, and I think Shona mentioned this as well. So, you know, there's been a lot of talk about bipolar ionization. There's been lots of UV discussions. There's been PCO, ozone keeps coming up for some reason. Drew, what are your opinions on some of these secondary devices?
So I'm admittedly a little disconnected from call it the back of house these days. I haven't had anybody ask about it. You know, I've read things here and there. I've seen, Benny, to your point, you know, these things are early. There's not a lot of data behind some of the technology that's out there yet. I mean, we're only 6 months into a once 100 years life-altering thing anyway. So there is no, like, there's no long-term right now in terms of data collection. So I haven't seen it. More than anything, everything that I've heard talked about are operational changes. And like Thru's point around, you know, kind of the essence of not always having a technology solution for a problem. You know, a lot of the things that we're working with clients now as well is, what are your policies and protocols for getting people, you know, back, that you don't have to have an app or a website to do some of these things. It's how are you laying out the office? How are you marking the floor? What's the policy for visitors coming in? So, you know, I haven't heard much on UV. I'd be curious to hear what Shona and Thru have seen, if anything.
I could definitely talk more about the ozone piece, or the bipolar ionization piece. I guess ozone and bipolar ionization are stored in the same part of my brain. But, you know, we were actually just about to do a research project right before the pandemic to compare IAQ levels with ionization versus living machines in two side-by-side rooms. And so we definitely, I personally think it is a great technology. And by looking at the lab results so far, just in relation to the potential for a kill rate for something like COVID, results show that there is a potential for that to be a solution, in the sense that, and I don't want to misspeak here either, but lab results show that different strains of the virus have been able to be killed by using ozone. But that is making an assumption that using bipolar ionization to kill the virus. So that's just assuming, though, that the airstream with the COVID in it is going to hit the bipolar ionization. So I think that there's a lot of assumptions that need to be made in order to think that it's an effective technology, but lab results are showing that it has a high kill rate if it hits the virus.
Yeah, and I think that the same goes, you know, ultraviolet germicidal disinfectants have been around for a long time. We use them in hospitals, and surgical suites, and their handling units and final filters and coil cleaning. They're used very frequently. It's proven technology. Upper zone UV is there, but it all has to be engineered specific to the application. Nothing can just be put right in and expected to work. And it's like bipolar ionization, PCOs, UV. What is their first pass kill rate? The stuff's still circulating through your air. That's why I think, you know, Drew's point earlier to lots of dilution, extra ventilation is a great strategy. And that seems to be in line with a lot of what ASHRAE's been promoting. And so just real quick, I had a comment just to define, I think I mentioned it in passing, but PM 2.5 is particulate matter. So it's the size of little particles in the air, and 2.5 is a micron size. So it's a very, very small thing, which, you know, we can talk about filters and things like that, but this is a technology piece, not a sedentary piece of equipment piece. So I want to, Drew, there's a question here for you that I think is kind of interesting. Have clients been asking for rent credits since they haven't been there and they're not using their space? Have you heard anything in the real estate market about that? So
I'll caveat this by I work with a lot of the advisory folks in the business. I don't talk to them every day. So just because I haven't heard that that's happening doesn't mean that it's not. What's the old parable. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So it could be happening, and I just haven't heard about it. But it's, you know, more than anything, we've been hearing from clients, some have been announcing publicly, some have not, that they're holding leases and just telling everybody come back in June or July of next year. You know, Google has announced publicly they're not coming back. I think it's June of next year. I had 2 or 3 just various industries last week, financial services, manufacturing, and there was a CPG firm as well who all said somewhere between April and June of next year. But those could change. I mean, that's the other reality of what we're dealing with here is whatever we posit here today, it could likely change tomorrow, next week. So haven't heard of it yet, but who knows?
That's the same here. I've not heard of that in our commercial world that we work in, but we do know that a lot of the, you know, the buildings are using less energy right now because they're partially occupied. Even though they're bringing in lots of fresh air, there's just very little energy used. There's less cleaning, there's less security, less cleaning because there's no people there. And, you know, we've heard that, you know, some of the maintenance costs that go above the rent, the CAM costs and things like that are going to need to be refunded at the end of the year. So I know that's probably what I've seen the most. But one of the other questions for you, Drew, and I want this get your opinion on this too, Thru, is the clients been asking for body temperature measurements at space entrances? Are you seeing this come through?
I've seen the requests, and CBRE has guidance on a full range of everything from, do you just want the little, it reminds me of the Fluke duct scanner from my field tech days, on up to, I mean, I've seen full body walk-through scanners like you see with TSA when you go to the airport, if you still go to the airport anymore. I think it varies. Again, that goes back to the well health safety rating. I mean, that's something that gets captured as a protocol, as an option if you choose to do it. I think it varies from client to client. Some see it as well, if you have a fever, it's too late. You know, you should have checked that before you came in. Some are seeing it as we need to have it. So it kind of runs the range.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add to that is I've seen the thermal scanning at the entrances being installed. I think the other question that tenants ask are, you know, should we do a questionnaire or a pledge by our employees that put a lot of the onus back on them? So again, technology can help support the questionnaire, but it also could be done on, you know, on a simple email or on a simple form, Google form. So I think we're seeing the spectrum on that. I've heard lots of varying opinions on that, to Drew's point.
That one gets tricky too. Once you start asking people health questions, we move out of regular data privacy and you go into healthcare data privacy, and that's ask a corporate attorney about HIPAA, and I hope you have 3 hours to.
Right. If you store it.
Yes.
So just a question that was in here earlier, I saw that I think is interesting. You know, we're coming out of a nice, hot, humid summer, going into actually a very beautiful fall right now, and going to go probably into a very cold winter, where we're not going to have a lot of humidification in buildings, and that's one of the key health factors in general health is maintaining humidity. We have that in you know, high-rise multifamily buildings and other types of buildings, but how are we? How do you foresee, I guess, going into this season without a vaccine, without the prevention methods? Is this gonna prevent people from coming back to work, not having humidification in buildings? Drew, you're swatting a fly.
Oh, Benny, I'm sorry. My 9-year-old was asking to play my iPad. I didn't tell him where it was. Can you give me the 5-second version of what you just asked me?
No humidification in office buildings this winter. Go. What's it going to do?
Oh, yeah. That's a very good question. I think it's going to just tie in as another variable, right, into how people perceive health and safety of space. They're going to be reading things on the internet, on Twitter, of certain ranges of relative humidity could kill a virus, and they may start asking questions. So a lot of the things that we've talked about around, you know, there being a difference between transparency and data and full disclosure of, you know, I think you just have to be ready. If people start asking around, we're usually at, 35% humidity, it's 20% today. What's happening in the space? Am I going to get sick? Do I have a high risk of getting sick? Of just being able to address it, just like anything else that comes up. It's, I think we collectively, the undercurrent is a lot of these questions we've been answering for years, pre-COVID, and now it's just, there's such a more narrow focus because it impacts every single person more than they realized in the past. I think it's just like anything else, like how do you respond to questions about temperature, or air changes, or outdoor CFM? We're going to see how it goes. We haven't lived with it, in this region outside of March.
Yeah. So Shona, building on that, or actually maybe shifting from that a little bit, moving to like indoor environmental quality instead of air quality, are you seeing that there's a shift to just looking at the entire environment, including things like noise, acoustics, just other light levels, things of that nature?
Yeah, it's almost the opposite, where before we were equally looking at air quality, visual comfort, acoustical comfort, and thermal comfort, and then using those as ways to educate people that energy is not the #1 concern. And so now that's a given, right? And so beforehand, we had started to focus on IAQ because it impacts cognitive function so much more than, say, visual comfort, just from based on recent research. But now it's really focused on IAQ. The only reason we're using things like acoustic monitors is as an additional source of ground truths for occupancy levels. And I saw a question about what variables for acoustics we're looking at. So we look at full spectrum decibel levels, and then overlay an algorithm that can identify sound at different frequencies and the type of sources of that sound. So for instance, a decibel level at a certain frequency that may indicate that there's background noise for HVAC versus a sound at a different frequency that would indicate human speech, or say a cough, right? So there's definitely some clients asking to use acoustics information in order to understand if they can identify a sick person in a space that may be making more noise. But that's definitely more of a niche request. Most of the requests are using acoustic data to understand how a space is being used and where people are.
Thru, same question. Are you, how is environmental quality factor into it? Is it still mostly focused on IAQ, or are you also getting some look at the total environment?
We're mostly looking at IAQ. We are looking on obviously space utilization, but from an environmental standpoint, right now, those are our two kind of prevailing factors at this point. I'm sure, next, over the next, humidity will obviously be one, and so will temperature and everything else that comes with when heating goes on. And so.
Drew, how about the environment of the building?
I think overall it's, only the things I could potentially add on is we're still hearing from clients that they want some level of control or choice. The good news is a lot of the projects that were out there earlier in the year that included a bigger scope of digital workplace or smart building, or just, kind of the whole holistic package, they're still moving forward. And they very much are all still asking for, we want people to provide feedback. Like a lot of these things, I think we all get it as scientists and engineers. Of, you can look at a psych chart and you can tell someone, like, here's where you should be comfortable, is this little space right here. When, I think it's even in ASHRAE definition that there are 6 factors that go into human comfort, and 3 of them cannot be measured. Like, what clothes do you have on? What is your pulse rate right now? And, how are you feeling in general, which a sensor can't monitor. So I think that the continued importance of feedback from people in the space and how that impacts perception, regardless if it's a survey or a poll or an app that connects to HVAC and lighting and sound systems. I mean, those are the other things that we haven't really touched on is light and sound, I think, are getting a greater focus as well. It's not just the air that you breathe. It's all these things that well and reset kind of wrap up are all getting more attention these days.
Definitely. So, I guess this may be a good place to start talking about integration. So we're talking a lot about sensor technology. Shona, Thru, you talked about sensors that tend to be different from the building automation system. And maybe, Shona, maybe you can start by elaborating a little bit on, are these things eventually going to integrate? Is there a benefit to them being separate?
Sure. So just thinking about like the ways that we typically compare sensors, it starts with the sensed variables that are there. Then we look at connectivity. And so connectivity could be connecting to the Wi-Fi network or being a BACnet enabled monitor. I think the first reset accredited BACnet enabled monitor only came out like last year. So that's fairly new to the market. So before then, it was always just a given that the sensors would be on a Wi-Fi network. And we frequently get pushback from clients about that just because of data security concerns. So now we're starting to have these conversations about should the monitors connect into the BACnet network so that it can be used for actionable intelligence, not only for dashboarding and occupant behavior, but having automated changes happening with the HVAC system. One thing that I'm seeing is that the decision makers for those decisions are different. So the people who may make decisions around HVAC and HVAC controls are different from the people who make the decisions for, say, an IAQ transparency program. And so that's a great opportunity to unify two groups within the same entity, especially when it has to do with the building performance and how the building impacts tenants. But it is definitely a blocker that we see frequently. It needs to be where we go. I know on a recent project, the client does not want the monitors to be connected to the BACnet network, but still does want the monitors to be a source of actionable intelligence for the HVAC system. So we're using our data analytics team to come up with other ways to pull in that data set in a different way back to the HVAC network. The only other thing I'd mention when we talk about comparing other than connectivity is power. People keep asking us about PoE battery versus just plugging in a monitor, having line voltage. So we're definitely seeing a number of case studies where the battery power has failed way too early. So for us, we're gravitating towards PoE at the moment and are really looking into gathering a few case studies around that. So they're kind of the things that are front of mind around sensor technology right now. As I mentioned, we've compared a lot of them, but we just try and be as open source as possible and not have monitors that have ongoing subscription costs. So a lot of monitors that have a gateway type system where there's monitors, then a central gateway hub typically have subscription costs, which can cause issues for ongoing operational costs. And normally those gateway type systems require remote calibration rather than a factory recalibration or replacing a sensor. So seeing that being something else we're trying to steer clear of.
Thru, I guess the same question to you, like how are you seeing integration with other building systems?
So I would say there's a lot of opportunity to integrate into a BAS or BMS system, but it's expensive to do so. So these, the sensors and to move quickly also is a challenge. So what we integrate a lot of different platforms and a lot of different systems. So think access control systems, elevators, the BMS system, and then we have the kind of IoT, the occupancy sensors and IAQ sensors. So we have a centralized data, a database for this, it's a graph database that kind of collects all this different information and provides context. But it's, you have to integrate all of this information. It's not, in a silo, it can only do so much, which is inform, but what you really need is to optimize, and the integrations are key for that optimization, which again, you could either do that manually by providing a lot of actionable data to the engineers in the building, or you can actually integrate the systems to be automated so that it, that the actions are actually can self-optimize.
Drew, do you have a perspective on that as well?
Yeah, I say this as someone who has deployed it, designed it, and sold it. So I've seen all sides of the house for this particular conversation. This could be a 3-hour plus deal on its own. I think Shona hit 2 that really stuck out to me. Of one, the whole concept of corporate network security, of regardless of what kind of sensor, if it's occupancy, if it's IAQ, if it's anything that is considered an IoT device at this stage of the game, no enterprise, corporate entity, Fortune 250, whoever it is going to let you put any of those on their network. And if they do, it's going to take you 9 to 16 months to get through a very arduous process that vendors will have to go through on their own. It's painful, and you have to keep it up every year. So the way I've gotten around it in the past is, just running a business DSL line to a network closet. So you have your own dedicated, like, anything can touch this. And you can say that to a CISO, to a CTO, and they say, is it touching my network? No, great, I don't care what you do, that's fine. So keeping that air gap between systems is big. And then the second piece around stakeholder aggregation, I think as consulting engineers, you have the prime opportunity to get everyone in a single place over the course. Like, you have a compelling event. If you're designing a new building, then the business is involved, HR is involved, CRE, FM, IT, everybody. They all have a say. And the way that we're seeing a lot of clients do this now, probably over the last 18 months, is we hold deep dive sessions with every technology provider. And we get a client-side solutions architect to say, all right, here's our network. Where are you going to connect your stuff? Like, are you running single tenant or multi-tenant in the cloud? What firewalls, what VPN tunnels are, like, we design the whole thing together up front and get everybody in the same place. Otherwise, if you wait too long, good luck getting agreement for, like Shona saying, the group that pays for and maintains a sensor may not pay for and maintain the underlying HVAC asset. So you have a big opportunity here.
Great. Thru, I had a question on the future of Internet of Things now that we have all these devices everywhere. Is this going to expand, you think, into the tenant space with additional type of things beyond just air quality and comfort sensors?
I think so. I think that enterprises and corporations are really trying to figure out how they create that connected workspace, workday. And that is, there's a bit of a difference on the, on the shell and core of a building versus inside the tenant spaces, largely on space booking. When it comes to conference room booking, there's also that added piece of integration to their Active Directories and their user database, and how you can have that seamless experience throughout. A lot on the AV side. So within the conference room, again, it's all around that collaboration space of the connectivity there. We've also heard some ideas of, well, we want to understand the power loads on each individual electric outlet, and how we could, decrease those loads. We've heard ideas on being able to, again, depending on how the space is actually set up and what HVAC zones there are, if you could do more zone level controls for heating and cooling. Those are some of the big ones that we have heard. And then we've heard on the tenant engagement side, just some more activity based, but that's not really IoT and connectivity there. That's more human connectivity than it is IoT. Those are the big ones.
Drew, any thoughts? I know you like your IoT too.
Oh yeah, I am most bullish right now on any sort of occupancy sensing, people counting, presence detection. They're everywhere. It is, of the 100 clients that we've talked to, my team and I, in the last 3 months, the two big things they always talk about is occupancy sensors and some aspect of resource booking. So everyone understands that we've now seen, we were trending this way anyway, right? Like 2030, the big prediction is people will work from anywhere. It's no longer work from home, it's WFA, it's work from anywhere. So that whole concept of a digital workplace where my tech stack at home has to seamlessly integrate with my tech stack in the office. I shouldn't have a difference. COVID has taken 10 years and shortened it into probably 9 months. So the market is seeing that, and we have clients who have said, I've been trying to get funding internally to deploy people counting sensors for 5 years, and I just got told, go do it in the next 6 months. We have to be able to count who's there. I think what's coming, and I say this as someone at a commercial real estate company, is I think a lot of firms are going to start looking at how much space are they actually utilizing. And I know some of them have a number. And if I'm the CFO or the VP of finance, I'm going to say, go put sensors in your space. And line of business may be telling me, like, my people will still come in 60% of the time. If a sensor for 6 months says, this says 20%, like, you're losing half your floor. So I think it's in part that, and I think from just the data you can pull out of a sensor for occupancy is just, you can do a lot financially. And we've seen, Shona mentioned a couple firms, Density raised $50 million 2 months ago, VergeSense raised, I think, 11 or 12 in March. So the opportunity is big.
I think the only other thing that neither of us touched on that I've been hearing is smart bathrooms inside of the tenant space, not so much at the, again, at the building level, but more so at the tenant space. And I've seen some pretty interesting and interesting programs, from connecting flush valves to water faucets to soap dispensers to get an understanding of hand wash rates, like the percent of people who actually wash their hands, to then how long. That hasn't really picked up in the corporate spaces. That goes in the bucket of don't want to know that information type of thing. No. So you're
gonna start hand wash shaming people. Alarm's gonna go off.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm not coming to work anymore because nobody washes their hands.
Yeah, I don't want to see that data.
Exactly.
Two things I guess I wanted to mention just with the large scale IoT deployments is things that I didn't expect being asked to do. And so one is like calculating the large level of data throughput and how that's going to put pressure on a network. So, that's a significant impact to someone's network. But the other piece is really, when we're putting all these sensors in the space, coordination. So if we think of how we had to coordinate ducts before, how we had to advocate for having a sensor on a wall if it's just one temperature sensor, we're now being asked to create renderings of the entire floor plate to show like what it would look like if there's one air quality monitor, acoustic monitors, and then all these different people counters all across the space. It is a coordination nightmare, and something that we probably need to be adding into our contracts as part of our fee, is to help clients through that process of visualizing what all of these sensors will look like in their space.
Oh, that would be huge. If you can show somebody a rendering of, that's what irks me the most. And I was at Aon, and my team owned any technology inside a conference room. Our head of real estate asked me every time we go into a new space, like, this is my boardroom. Why am I seeing an occupancy sensor for the lighting system, an aux sensor for the HVAC, one for the AV, and one to count how many people are in it? That's 4 sensors in one room. Why can't it just be one? And it was impossible. Like, I don't know. It should be, but the magical unicorn doesn't exist. So if you can render that, not only is the coordination a nightmare, but
I think that coordination, I think what we could be excited to watch coming over the next few years is that the technology of digital twinning on the operational level, and how we can, how we could truly, see the promise of IoT in a visual way.
So just time for a couple more questions. And Shona, one of the questions that came in goes back to energy efficiency. A lot of the recommendations here, dilution, ventilation, taking the demand control ventilation strategies that we've been putting in buildings away, and shutting off energy recovery wheels temporarily. One of the questions here, I think, goes towards, indoor units that just recirculate and don't turn over a lot of air like a VRF system. So how do you feel that in the design realm, things are going to potentially change as it goes to design? One conversation is, do we go in high-rise buildings and put central air handling equipment, or do we go back to the style in the 80s where we had an air handler in every floor? How do you see design changing, or do you see it changing?
I think what we're gravitating towards when it comes to design is exactly, a lot of it is what we recommended before, and it has to do with flexibility. So having a decoupled system is going to offer flexibility to ramp up and ramp down your ventilation levels as you wish. And then having your thermal solution at each zone level offers thermal flexibility. So just similar to the way that we were recommending to design to say 600 to 800 parts per million for operation, we were recommending dedicated outdoor air systems with a thermal solution before. So that piece has stayed the same. There's also requests for additional control, but again, that's what we were always advocating for before. So at a high level, the designs haven't really changed. It's more some of the smaller design interventions around operations and say having space for an additional filter if you need to put one in, and having additional static pressure on your fan budgeted for to add in those extra filters. So to me, what I'm seeing is all focused around flexibility.
I want to ask the audience here, or you guys, a question anybody can answer, but we often don't mix politics with ASHRAE, but Don asked the question: has the political climate around the health question crept into any of your work that you're doing? Anybody? Or are we all technical?
I can say that there are different regions in the U.S. that have different opinions on whether we need building technology or not. And it's not a blanket of a region as a whole, right? Obviously, it's more just, I think politics are definitely playing into whether or not we can make a strong case for the building technology. But I think owners overall see the need for it and are pushing that. But I don't know if it's, I think that everyone understands that we need to have a more connected work society or community, I should say. And I think that that's sticking. So whether or not that's political, I think there are aspects to it, obviously, but I'll let Drew answer. How about that, or Shona?
I haven't seen it impact the technology side. Policy, absolutely. For your global clients, they're going to have one consistent thing regardless of where you work. But if you're more regional in certain parts of this country or others, they may vary with protocols, but the tech doesn't care, of what I've seen.
Yeah, I'd be the same. I remember someone telling me buildings last longer than presidents, so that was a source of consolation. But there's a business case for getting people back into buildings. So there's clients who want to do the bare minimum piece to demonstrate that they're doing something. But it seems like that's what all occupants are asking for. I haven't seen any conversations around it being politicized from clients.
Yeah, likewise. Hasn't really crept into my world either. So it is 6 o'clock. I'm out of beer. And I want to ask the crowd one kind of rapid fire final question of each of you, just to get your opinion on this. So this is a technology discussion. What technology do you see becoming mainstream? What kind of technology do you think is going to have persistence following this pandemic? And I'll start with you, Shona.
I think monitoring isn't going to go away. I worry about the plexiglass that we're putting up and the bumper stickers on the floor and what that's going to look like when it has to be peeled off. But sensor technology can be used in multiple ways. I think the future is design firms being held accountable based on outcomes, and operators also being held accountable based on outcomes. We saw with a couple of years ago with the forest fires in California, everyone wanted sensors there, and now this is just more of a, unfortunately, unifying global issue. So I think that sensor technology is going to stay, and recalibration will hopefully get easier. It's my dream.
Great, thank you. Drew?
I love the concept of outcomes. That and requirements are my two favorite words. So Shona, applause there. I keep repeating myself, but I think the concept of just being able to surface and really display in real time how many people are in a space. I think to the average everyday person visiting the building, they can infer a lot. I mean, a lot of what we've been told for 6 months is don't hang out with more than 10 people at a time. If you can signal to me somehow, whatever the media is, that there are 9 people in your office right now, like that feels safe. I mean, certainly we can sprinkle in, you know, all the deeper technical backend that we all know and love. But I think just being able to show people there's only 10 people in your office, it's safe to you, I think that's going to last.
Drew, final comment?
I definitely think occupancy sensors as well and occupancy reporting. But I'll take the alternative to what Drew's saying in terms of limiting. I am seeing, just for my staff alone, we have a hot desk sign up and who comes so we can limit the number of people. The minute that people see like other folks sign up, they're ready to come in. So I'm at full occupancy when there's over 4 people because they want to see each other and they're excited to like collaborate again in person. So if that's any sign of hope that there's something out there that, you know, occupancy can play both ways. I think it could be a motivator or a deterrent. Take your pick on which one. And then a non-building technology that I think that stays is Peloton. So my 2 cents.
I agree with that. Well, thank you. I'll throw in my my opinion. It's maybe not as technology oriented, but I do think that all these companies that felt that their employees couldn't work remotely and be efficient have probably changed their mind by now. It seems like I think that's going to be something that persists, that there's going to be a more, to Drew's point earlier, by 2030, people will be able to work anywhere. And I think this was a huge catalyst towards it. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Lippy or Dave.
All right. Well, I am just, as always, impressed and thankful with everybody who's on this panel, and Benny for moderating. I want to thank Thru and Shona and Drew for their contributions to this discussion and their insights and expertise. So it was really a nice conversation. I hope everybody was able to get something from it. If there's any residual comments, questions from those out there in the audience, please feel free to reach out to us and we can interact with the team and get some information back out to you. But as always, I want to thank everybody for participating. There is an exit survey. It's very short, so please provide your feedback. And we hope to see you next month at the October 13th meeting. So really appreciate everybody here. Thank you all again, and we hope to see you soon.